The first one, emerald ash borer. Actually, people really like EAB. They think it's a really pretty insect, and they're really happy to see it. And then they turn around and they see their ash tree, and they're like, "What happened to my ash tree?" And then we have to say, "Well, it's this guy. This guy's doing it." So you can't be happy that you have them if you're not happy that you don't have ash trees. But the adult really isn't the major problem here. It does feed on leaves, but it really low damage level throughout the landscape. What's making all the damage is its immature life cycle, the larva that's under the bark that you don't see until your tree starts to die and the bark starts to come off. But what you will see, probably not the D-shaped exit holes until you're really looking at it. And even if you know that EAB killed the tree, sometimes it's really hard to find those exit holes. But you will see the galleries under the bark if you peel some of the bark away. But usually the number one thing that people start seeing is woodpecker damage. The woodpeckers are a far better tool at detecting EAB than we'll ever be. And they go through and they peel off part of the bark, and people are like, what's kind of going on? And then you start seeing dieback or mortality, and then more people are concerned about their trees. And then you get a bunch of calls. Okay? So Simeon already stole this slide. Don't look at it. But what you will see is a healthy tree. You start seeing a little bit of dieback, then you see more dieback. And eventually your whole major canopy will be dead. And then you'll get a whole bunch of epicormic shoots coming out, and it'll look like a little bush on the bottom of it. And this is because the tree is dead, but the root system is still live and vibrant. And it dies so fast that it still has all the storage reserves to push up new epicormic branches. This kind of shows you where we know emerald ash borer is in the U.S. The green is showing where the range of native ash trees are. So there's plenty of room for EAB to keep spreading throughout the U.S. We talked a little bit about the repeal of the firewood quarantine in Michigan itself, and it's basically because 80 of the 83 counties have been confirmed infested with EAB. You know, Wisconsin went to a statewide quarantine, so it's coming up on the other side of us, and we were trying to look at economics too, and you know, it's really stressful for a lot of the timber producers and the sawmills in the western UP because they have to go around those 3 counties, and now that Wisconsin has a quarantine, they would have to drive all the way around. It's really hurting them, basically. And we're really not gaining much to have that quarantine in place. So we kind of removed it to help people out a little bit because those counties, they haven't had a confirmed case, but chances are they do have emerald ash borer in them. That's the bottom line. Okay, but we haven't given up. You know, there's plenty of things you can do with emerald ash borer to save trees. Usually you're talking about a high value tree or a tree in an urban landscape that people want to save. You're going to be, you know, there's a lot of systemics, there's a lot of different types of insecticides, a lot of different application methods that you can go with. One of the best ones is triage, made by ArborJet. You get at least 3 years of control with that product itself. They're not exactly cheap, but you know, if you have a tree that you really want to save, you can do it, and you don't have to treat it every year. Okay. City trees, there are research papers that have gone out that talk a little bit about you know, saving yourself a little bit of money instead of doing it all in one lump sum. You can kind of do it, you know, throughout the years. So I think what they basically came out as is that if you treat 20% of your ash trees every year, you can save the majority of your ash trees in that city. So you don't have to treat all 100% of your ash trees up front. You don't have to worry about that. You can kind of, work that through a 5-year period and then still get about 8 years of control. Okay. There's other things. There's a lot of research going on with parasitoids to get them out. They're usually very specific. The 3 that APHIS is working on are Tetrasticus. It has a really short ovipositor, so they kind of go after young trees or smooth bark ash trees. So you're looking at saplings or upper canopies and like white ash, where they'll be able to lay their eggs onto the larva through the bark. Then you have Ovius, which is an egg parasite, and all these have to be timed right with EAB life cycle. So if there's no eggs out, there's no reason to release Ovius. If there's no larval stages, if you don't have high populations, you're not going to want to release Tetrasticus. Third one there is Bathius. It has a really long ovipositor. It goes after larger trees, or thicker bark. So we have a little bit of a range filling all the different niches. And then the one that kind of doesn't get a lot of credit and should get a lot of credit is Actinicollis capredae. That is a native parasitoid. Okay, so there hasn't been a lot of research in the APHIS lab kind of looking at this one, but when you go out into the field, this is the one that you're going to see well established in these areas, and they are doing some type of control on the EAB population. But if you combine all 4 of these, it doesn't even touch woodpecker predation. You get 80 to 90% mortality just from woodpeckers. Okay? So that's why you see all the scuffed up bark, because the woodpeckers are so good at finding emerald ash borer. But when you're talking about hundreds, thousands, millions of EAB, take 80 to 90% out, you still have, detrimental EAB population. And at that point, usually your ash tree is too far gone to save it. But there's other things that are looking promising with emerald ash borer and ash restoration. So we're looking at lingering ash or resistant ash trees. We're going into areas that have been hit with EAB for a really long time. So we're pretty much focusing east of Grand Rapids, south of Flint, the southeast area, going in, looking at the trees that are surviving. Now these trees might not be 100% healthy, but they are alive, which is saying, hey, there's some resistance at least in that tree. Some trees actually do look really good and you got 90% mortality around them, and I don't know how they survived as well as they did, but they did. So we're going in, we're taking scions off those trees, we're sending them in, getting them propagated. We're trying to develop seed orchards, crossbreed them. You crossbreed 2 lingering ash, you actually get a quarter of them actually are more resistant to EAB. About 50% of them are as resistant, and then 25% of them just throw out because they're no good. But this takes a long time. Trees don't grow overnight, and start producing seeds right away. So it's decades in the making. It's been going on for a while now. So in my life, in my career, I should be able to do a lot of restoration work by the end of my career. Hopefully, that's the game plan. Another thing to kind of look at is white ash survival. So in areas where there was a lot of black ash and green ash, which are highly susceptible to EAB, white ash didn't do so well because it would build up the population so heavy on green ash and black ash, and then they would basically swarm and overwhelm the white ash. Usually white ash has about 40% resistance to EAB, so if it's a low population of EAB, normally it will not kill your white ash in those stands. But there are 60% of white ash that are still susceptible. So, this isn't a silver bullet by any means, but there is good resistance in white ash. So we're also doing the same thing with white ash, trying to develop more resistant trees in white ash. And then you have blue ash, which is great. It is highly resistant to EAB. Usually you do not see mortality because of emerald ash borer blue ash. Problem with blue ash is it does not grow farther north than Lansing unless it gets planted. Now, with climate change and everything that's changing, that might change, and we might be able to replace some of the ash farther north with blue ash in the future. But blue ash and white ash grow in the same general landscape. Black ash and green ash grow in wet areas, along rivers, completely different, riparian zone species. So blue ash is never going to be able to replace green ash or black ash. So yeah, it'll move farther north. We might have some ash trees in Michigan still, but it's not going to fix all of our problems. That's about it for EAB at this point. Yeah.
The question I get routinely with people about EAB is, in our area, it's kind of moved through, like, yeah, there's still probably some EAB around, but like a lot of our ashes are dead. So is there a hypothesis about whether or not the EAB would wipe back through as ashes are growing up from stumps and et cetera?
Yeah, so usually the population of, green ash actually grows really fast. So it only takes a couple years to become a size that EAB will find. Usually the population stays at a very moderate level, and then they'll hit them as they find them. So say that it'll come back. There'll never be like a massive wave like there was, because there's just not the host material anymore. But the trees, as they get bigger, like touch elm disease, will probably die over time. And that's why we're looking at the resistance to try to do restoration with resistant trees that can tolerate EAB better.